All right, everybody, welcome into the best damn pod in the land. I usually call this Buckeye Friday, but we're going to call it Juck-Eye Friday because Juck's back. So it's Juck-Eye Friday. Dan is still saving the world from houses in the vice presidency or whatever. So, yeah, Juck, thanks for coming back, man. Appreciate you. I'm actually really happy to have you because I have some really fun topics today. I guess that the fan base might get mad about. So, and I like to poke the bear a little bit, so we'll see what happens. How are you, man?
I'm good, brother. I actually missed my live show this morning due to some real world obligations, so I'm happy to be able to get on with you this afternoon
Yeah.
and discuss what I did not get to discuss this morning. So thanks
Okay.
for having me back. I feel like I am partner number 2, just kind of filling in on the rotation at this point. So always happy to be here with you while
Yep.
Dan saves the world for his VP of Houses of the World and such.
Yes. I'm gonna get him a shirt or something that says that he can wear on the show. Yeah. All right. So, Juck, all week, I've heard a myriad of things from anywhere from that Zen Mahalski might start to he may start. He is not starting now. And everybody's got opinions. It's like buttholes. Everybody's got one. They've been pretty tight-lipped about what they're going to do, but there is and are rumblings that Carson Hinsman may be in the starting 5 at left guard. So what are your thoughts, man? Do you think that happens?
First off, if Austin Cerebell didn't have such a rough game against Nebraska, I don't think it would even be a thought, right? What you would do here at that position, but he did. It was pretty rough. So did Tegra, but the Hinsman situation, when we've seen him this year get the reps, and he's not gotten a ton, but when he's been in there, and I know a lot of people are clamoring for him. The guy started a lot of games last year, obviously, and he wasn't horrific for a guy in a tough spot. I thought he performed valiantly, right? But this year, I certainly expected a jump. There hasn't been one in the film in the spots that he's had. So I know there's a lot of people who maybe haven't paid any attention to when he was in there, thinking like, hey, maybe this is the answer. From what I've seen, it's not. It's just not at all. A bit concerning, to be honest, that he hasn't taken that jump. But I really, just based on that, I can't personally see how they could go with him. But then again, I thought the same thing about Zen after the Oregon game heading into Nebraska. So the decisions they've made on this offensive line have been puzzling to me. And I felt like they took a big gamble putting Zen in there and not using that 3-week time period they had from Oregon to Penn State to dial in your best 5, because we all know that Zen is not one of those best 5. So based on that odd decision, would it shock me if they went with Carson all of a sudden after we saw Luke come in at left guard instead of Austin, where he had played 2 games? And people talk about left hand, right hand. There's merit to that when you're talking about tackles. When you're talking about guards, correct, that's a different story. You're not setting at a 45. It's a totally different deal. There is some difference, not anywhere near when we're talking about tackles. So to me, Austin would have been your left guard there. Just a lot of puzzling decisions. So as far as Hinsman goes, I don't think we'll see him, but would I be shocked based on their decision-making process? No, not at all.
Yeah. So I guess I should say that you talked about this on your show yesterday. We both looked at Carson's film. What's been on film this year, not great. And I'm not picking on a kid. It just and maybe that's lack of reps. Maybe that's just not being prepared to get in the game. Lack of continuity on the offensive line. You can throw anything you want out there. But it definitely feels like Donovan Jackson will be the left tackle. I agree with you. I think Austin didn't have his best game. And I try to remind people, and I'm sure you know this, Austin Cereveld's high school did not believe in the forward pass. So he did not do a lot of pass blocking in high school. He's kind of a road grader. And I thought he played well enough when splitting reps with Tegra early in the year to warrant getting a look. And maybe they're trying to find their best five. So maybe it's, maybe Carson's the next guy up. Maybe Luke's the next guy up behind Austin. Maybe they're all three right together. We're not at practice. We don't know. But I can tell you what we see in the all 22, and I can tell you what I see on game day. And right now, I would say Austin has an advantage over Carson based on the amount of tape that there is of Carson. But everything,
Yeah, I'm
I
right
think
there.
everything's on the table. If you really want my honest opinion, I think everything's on the table, and they're going to try to find five that work.
When we say everything on the table, are you, and let's say, and I do agree with you that there are some neck and neck battles going on in there. And unfortunately, it's not because, Luke and Austin are doing so great,
Right.
but because neither of them are taking that next step. And we can kind of include Tegra in there as well,
Sure.
who, against lesser competition looked pretty damn good. As the competition has gotten better, we've seen, more and more kind of mental errors too, to go along with some lousy plays, but you're going to have that with a first time starter. My point is, the speed with which they make adjustments to personnel sometimes really disturbs me. Like
Mm-hmm.
the fact that I'm sorry, pardon me, not Tegra, Zen was in there until 4 minutes left in the game. That's just like, I don't understand why sometimes it seems to take them so long. And this is across the board, defensive adjustments and everything. Like they just don't seem to be on the ball with in-game adjustments from what I think we would see with past staffs, even with them in past years. It just seems
Right.
like something is slowing them down to react when there's an issue. Not what you'd expect from your $20 million coaching staff.
I would throw it back to, I think it was 2022. And maybe you'll recall this. I remember it was either the first or second game. I think it was the first game. I think it was Western Kentucky. And Josh Proctor missed a tackle in the open field. And Knowles yanked him off the field so fast, I thought his head was going to spin around. And he didn't
Wow.
play again. So where have we gone from that to where we are now, to where I'm comparing Jim Knowles to Jim Haycock and making changes at halftime? I don't know what's happened. I really don't. It's
That's an
beyond
excellent
confusing.
example, Chad. It's an excellent example to what I was kind of trying to say. They used to make personnel decisions going into a game, and if there were things that were up in the air and it wasn't working, they'd go try something else,
Right.
which is how I think we would all kind of like things to be. And this year, we've not seen that at all.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do the Justin Frye thing, man. And I sent it to you in my notes. I got to be honest. I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt the way the O line played in the first few games. Like I was like, okay, starting to turn the table, starting to see the Jim, I guess I don't want to call it practicing against a Jim Knowles defense, but starting to see them block well, the polling, the very creative counters, the Chip Kelly effect too,
Mm-hmm.
that they had practiced against what we thought was one of the best defenses in America all spring. So maybe the offense not moving the ball, part of that. But now we've had one guy who couldn't get hurt. We're having to shuffle the offensive line around. Zen has had 3 out of his 4 years under Justin Frye. Not ready in the slightest. So is this a Ryan Day hired his buddy, and we're paying the price of the end of the Studwara era and the inability for Justin Frye to coach football?
There's a whole lot in that one, isn't there?
Yes, there is. I teed you up
You
because I
know,
know.
Ryan Day, I don't know that he looked around the country and looked for the absolute best offensive line coach he can get. So we can certainly say that the relationship there had something to do with it, but that's not unusual to coaching. We see that often. And while I don't think it was probably the right hire, I do like, I think there's a lot of value in continuity like that at
Mm-hmm.
times. I mean, it can obviously work out great when it's someone that you have a prior relationship with, and maybe they're right there and they're an up and comer, and he did pretty well at UCLA. The thing that's bothered me, like you, is the left tackle has nothing to do with these young guards and people pulling the wrong way and things of this nature. Like there are just some mistakes that obviously you're going to have them once in a while, but when you see a game like that so discombobulated, And like you, I was feeling pretty happy with quite a few things. And I said, a couple weeks ago, I have been very critical of him as far as the recruiting aspect of his job. And I think people were saying he's a good quality developer. We hadn't seen it yet. And I really don't think you can really pinpoint that on an offensive line coach till about year 4.
Right.
But we've seen some promising aspects, right? For sure. Simmons, very promising. As far as it goes to Frye's ability to do that with a guy. Tegra, it's been a little slower, to be honest. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was a top 50 recruit in the country. He's still not quite there. And on down the line. Mixed results as far as development, in my opinion. But when we look at recruiting, and not just recruiting, but the inability of both him and Ryan Day, and it lays at both of their feet to do anything at all in the transfer portal to make something happen. And I've said this many times, that those guys just weren't out there for you to just go pick from. You had to go make something happen. They didn't make anything happen. And we entered this season in a spot where they knew if something happened to Simmons or Fryer, that they knew this was going to happen. They knew that people would be absolutely apoplectic that this is the situation we find ourselves in. They still didn't do anything about it. When we talk about his recruiting, I've talked to a lot of offensive line recruits in 2025 and 2026, and the issues that we had, this was a huge topic for us back 6 months ago. What is wrong with this guy in recruiting? And I kind of dug in on it with a lot of these guys. And there is one common refrain that I consistently hear. Ohio State, from an offensive line recruit's perspective, does not contact them, it's very, yes, here's where we stand, and then they just disappear. And they come back, a month later or something. Whereas these other schools, Michigan cited continually to me, consistent contact. And I understand from Frye's perspective, he doesn't feel like maybe he should have to do that. I get it, but that's being a dogged recruiter. Yeah. And as we both know, Ryan Day, yes, you want to be a great developer, but number one for him, for his assistant coaches in the priority list, is to be a dogged recruiter with successful results. We haven't seen it. Maybe that style gets you where you want to go at UCLA. It does not at Ohio State. So this is what he entered into. This is what's expected. He's not got that done. In this particular topic with him and his recruiting, when we look at, and I know we're going to talk about some prospects later, we're in a really precarious position here because it looks to me like there is a chance, based on that review that Ryan Day gave him, that you may turn the page from him after this year.
Right.
And this is a year with a huge opportunity to really get this thing back in line on the offensive line in recruiting. And I don't know at this point whether you are hurting more or helping more by getting rid of him. But I can tell you that, and I shared with you the other day, a comment from one of those Ohio 4.
Yeah.
And basically it was, I want to play at the next level. I don't want Columbus to be my next stop, which is just does not sound promising at all.
No, it doesn't. I have long thought, and this is just something that I floated to Dan too, that if the NCAA does expand the number of coaches and so on, could you bring in a dynamite recruiter and let Frye be the developer, and with Tim Drevno and some others to help that? And I think you could, but you're paying two people to do one job. In the days of recruiting not being national, so where in the past I'll use Maxwell Riley from Ohio, Avon Lake, right? I don't think you would have seen Oregon come to Ohio 20 years ago. And so those days where those kind of things and those kind of relationships, and the Ohio kid wants to play for Ohio State because football was very regional 20 years ago. And you and I both know this. And now it's not, with Twitter and the internet and tapes, and everything is everywhere, and you can get from Ohio to Oregon in 5.5 hours on a plane. So it's not those days are gone, and so that style of relationship I don't think works anymore. And I think that's my frustration behind where we are, because 2026, like I know you've hammered home with your folks, amazing recruiting class for linemen in Ohio, like probably one of the best we've seen since COVID, because, kids have been able to train as freshmen all the way through their senior year the way that you normally would have. COVID, 2020 and 2021 impacted a lot of kids and their ability to be in the weight room and some of the training and other things that they could have access to. And I'm sad that we are where we are with it, because honestly, man, I'm kind of stepped out of the Justin Frye thing, and I'm maybe, okay with them looking another direction, even if it costs us a recruit.
Oh, I got you. I mean, to your first point, when we talk about expanding the help, now that everybody can coach, and potentially bringing in someone else who's maybe an ace recruiter. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Mike, there are, if you go that route, I guess what you're saying is like maybe you would do that for someone who was like, oh my gosh, this guy is such an unbelievable developer. We can't possibly let him go just because the recruiting isn't quite up to top notch. Let's bring him in some help. I don't think we've seen anything out of Justin Frye that has made us think he's that good. You're
Right.
Ohio State. You have the ability to both pay the brand name, the ability to be a stepping stone to a head coaching position for the right guy. You have the ability to go out and get the best of the best. When you went out and did your job search and you brought in Justin Frye, were you bringing that in? I don't think so, but you let him prove it. He's had some seasons to try to prove that. At the end of this year, I don't know that you're going to say he's proven enough with development. Let's just try to get him some more help in recruiting. That to me would seem kind of, yeah, I think we can
It's
just go find a guy who
counterintuitive.
can do it all.
Yeah, right.
But as far as the Ohio recruiting thing, I mean, you're absolutely right. The world has shrunk for these kids. And what we used to see was maybe if you were a top 50 recruit in the country and you were out of the state of Ohio, you would see some of those Clemsons come in for a Jackson Carman and what have you. But now, if you're in the top 300 in the country, it goes all the way down that far. These kids all have offers from Bama, from Oregon, from Texas. A guy like Adam Guthrie, the kid's
Right.
got it all over the country, and he's, a top 200-ish recruit. And for these kids who maybe otherwise, and when we were in high school, that would seem like a really cool thing, but to actually go to Texas or Alabama, the world is so much smaller for these guys. They've grown
Yep.
up in this world where they've seen it's just normal to drop your top 10. They've seen all these recruits above them. You drop their top 10 all over the country, and they want to be part of that. In addition, when we go out of town, the connectivity you can have to your family, like there's so much less homesickness than we would have had.
Oh yeah.
It's just a different world. So you've got to recruit your in-staters like they're national recruits, and you've got the advantage, but you still have to put in that same dogged mentality if that kid was from North Carolina. We haven't seen that.
So I bring all this up because we have Quinshawn Junkins and Travion Henderson, who I think believe they're two of the top 5 backs, top 7 backs in the country. And we have this just popped today. Ohio State's run success on 3rd and 4th down is 65%. The Power Conference average is 73.6%. We have the lowest run rate percent of 3rd and 4th and 2 or less with our offensive line as it currently stands.
That's painful to see. I wouldn't have guessed that, to be honest.
I mean, Purdue is ahead of us.
Yeah, that's something.
Or wait, did I read that backwards? Oh, they have less 63.6. Sorry, I thought that said 68.
Yeah, but like you
so
said, not the company Ohio State prefers to keep.
No, look at this. We're Purdue, Maryland. I mean, Washington had a good year last year. BYU, Louisville's still ranked. I mean, good gravy, man. Like, geez.
Not what we expected, that's for sure.
No, I mean, I went into the year thinking this would, I was excited about Zone 6, but I went into this year thinking, those two could combine for about 2,500 yards, splitting carries, and we'd be having, because, look at the 2019 with J.K. Dobbins, that crew, and Olave and still got his, I'm just.
Oh, yeah. Interesting you bring up 2019. That was the last year that we had kind of a very run-heavy skewed run-to-pass ratio. Normally, throughout Ryan Day's tenure, even back through as when he started as an offensive coordinator, it's been about 52%, 48%, one way or the other,
Right.
with the exception of 2019, which was about 60% run. And I thought that this year would look a little more like 2019.
I did too.
So far, it has not. It's looked like all the other years, with the exception of one game, and that was the Nebraska game where they ran the ball 66% of the time in a game that you were averaging less than 2.5 yards a carry, which was just another one of the really puzzling things that came out of that game. And there were many.
Yes. I don't even know where to begin with that one. So I guess from what I'm getting at, man, is that like looking at the 2026 board, and in order to bridge the gap, even at, let's say we get the top 4 linemen in Ohio to commit to Ohio State for 2026, there, in my opinion, there isn't a David Sanders that you just drop into left tackle on day one. I don't know how they fix this next year, and I know we're still in this year, but I have a tendency about midway through the year to start looking at what next year looks like. And I mean, I don't expect Jimmy back. I did put a little note in here because I was going to ask you. Ryan Day said multiple injuries to Jimmy Simmons. Would that lean you to believe that maybe he would come back one more time? I mean, he's got enough tape out there. He was playing really well. He played pretty good last year. His body's completely transformed. I think he was well on his way to be a top 50 pick in the NFL draft because left tackles don't grow on trees. What do you think?
I thought, I don't know, probably about week 5, there's no way they're going to be able to keep him. No chance. And now that he's been injured, I think it's probably even a longer shot. That's
Okay.
just my personal feeling. Obviously, we don't know anything, but what we do know is how the NFL was looking at him. And you're spot on. Some people's big boards had him as the number 1 left tackle, which is like, okay, we really had a guy like that, which also puts into perspective and why, we should chill out a little bit. You're going to be a lot worse when you lose the best left tackle in college football.
Right.
I don't think we knew that he was going to be quite that valued or looked at like that. That's incredible. And props to him. That's awesome for him. It's going to be awesome for the program moving forward, to be honest,
Right.
To get another top-notch offensive lineman into the NFL like that. But as far as coming back after an injury like that, it would be, I don't think there's any amount of NIL that could keep that one from happening. He's got to go get that first contract and get on to that second one, which is what they always talk about.
Yep. I took a little grief for saying that I thought the injury actually propelled him more towards the NFL than returning. Because you only have so many snaps, you only have so many knee injuries, you only have so many things, and you're gambling on yourself. And I don't know how much more he really has to prove. He was going to be like I said, and I still think he'll be a top 64 pick. He'll be a first or second round draft pick. So,
I don't know. We don't know exactly what that injury is yet, do we? At any rate,
well, go ahead.
Do you know?
I don't know. But when Ryan Day said multiple, I assumed it was ACL, MCL. Okay. That's an assumption.
That's
no one has said
kind of what
that.
I assumed as well. Regardless, when we look at those kind of injuries now, I mean, it doesn't seem to be anything that has been hindering these guys as far as moving forward. If he can come back and show that he can still move like he did before, I mean, it's almost like it's a no big deal to them anymore. As good as they are at repairing those things. I think that we've seen track records of guys having those in college where it really doesn't end up affecting them much in the draft. My hope is that he has enough time to let that repair so he can work out for them. I don't know what the timeline is on that, but
yeah,
maybe
well,
not.
we saw, I think the fastest I've ever seen anybody come back from it might have been Adrian Peterson. Like he was back in under a year, I think. But he only, I think his was just an ACL. I don't think it was both. So, and Simmons is a bigger guy with more weight.
Yeah.
So I
at
would
any
be,
rate, I'm with you. My logical thought process is no, that propels him more towards the NFL. That's my thought process. And when we talk about how much you can gain by coming back to college, like he's already done everything he can do.
Yeah.
put it on film, in my opinion. But I also felt the same way with a guy like Travion.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think him coming back could. I thought that he put everything on tape last year in a couple of those games where you could see the explosion, you could see the physicality he was running with, sticking his head in there. And I didn't think there was anything he could do to raise his draft stock coming back. And I was pretty pessimistic that he would. And then this year we see this unbelievable improvement in his blitz pickup, and it's like, wow, he actually is going to improve his draft stock. So that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I do think so. And I think the other thing he was trying to prove is that he could stay healthy through a whole season.
But
Personally,
that was my other thought about it was, what if he doesn't? Then he is officially saddled with, this guy cannot stay healthy for a year. So
right.
I felt like he had more to lose if that happened than he did to gain. And that's why I thought, look, if I was advising this kid, I'd probably tell him, look, you got to go now. If you get hurt next year, you are officially like, this is your label. It is sticking through it for the rest of your career. You are injury prone, and that's just what it is.
Right.
Anyway, that's an old conversation.
It is, but so I'm gonna switch, and I'm gonna bring Ryan Day right into the limelight today. So Ryan Day says he wants the defensive line to rotate more. The defensive coordinator says, I know that that's what Ryan wants, and he wants the defensive line to go ahead and rotate, but that he trusts the defensive line coach to make those decisions. What? Who's steering the ship? Like, I have a boss. If my boss says I need you to do X, I'm going to do X.
Ryan Day has given us mixed signals here. Came out and said that that's what he wanted after the Oregon game. You didn't get it in Nebraska. Comes out and says that's what he wants. He wants more. And then that press conference happens shortly after him, where Jim Knowles is deferring to Larry Johnson. Dylan Davis, our buddy over at Juck on Bucks, asked Ryan Day on Wednesday, what do you feel about the defensive coordinator deferring to the position coach? And my impression from Ryan Day at that point was, this is all him. He's not asking these guys to rotate anymore than they are. That's what I read from his answer. They're doing exactly what they're told. So I don't think that this is like him trying to get something done and it's not getting done. I think this is actually the opposite way. I think this is probably, at this point, this is all on him. He does not want to take a risk at putting in those backups, because he brought up Oregon. He's like, every snap counts in a game like that. Philosophically, I just totally disagree with him. I think that you're getting 85% out of those starters when you're playing them so much that they're gassed. And I don't think they're 15% better than their backups. If they're 40% better than their backups, then okay, let them get a little more tired. I just don't think that there is a big drop off from Jack and JT to Mitchell Melton and Kenyatta and Caden Curry. I really don't. I think they're all pretty good at certain things. And I think that they ought to play that a little more specific to their strength based on what they're trying to do, game plan specific and whatnot. And then in the middle, I think we have agreed for a long time, you and I think a lot of people are coming around to, Caden McDonald is an impact player. Yep. That guy playing 22 snaps over the last 2 games, absurd to me, especially when we're looking at a game like Oregon, when the big dudes in the middle were gassed, man. They were so gassed they couldn't get down in their stances. But to bring us back, I do think that this is now not an issue of insubordination or Ryan Day not being able to get his assistant coaches to do what he wants them to do, or a failure of him, leadership. A lot of people point to that. This is all him. He does not feel comfortable playing a lot of backups. And that's just what it is. What bothers me, Chad, is how much they made that a priority and said it all throughout the offseason.
Makes me mad.
And I said to Dylan the other day, if there was one overarching point, and since I started my show, I have forced myself to watch every single time these guys talk to the press, all the players. It's incredibly boring. But if you asked me, Juck, based on watching all of that, if you had to pick one overarching message from the whole offseason through spring, all the way through preseason, what would you say that overarching message was from this coaching staff and from these players? What was the one thing permeating through the Woody? We are playing depth this year, and a lot of it because the season is so incredibly long. It's all we heard. And they started off like that. Old habits die hard. They've turtled up, and I think it's all coming from the top.
Yep. Well, one of the things I would love to see, and since we're talking about the defensive line, I want to see Tyleek slide over to the 1 tech and let Caden play next to him at the 3 tech.
Ooh, that sounds nasty.
I like
real
it.
Nasty.
I mean, because they both get off the ball really well. Tyleek is really good at eating up blocks. Caden is, I think he would eat in that scenario. But, what do I know? I'm just sitting in my studio talking about it. So
can I tell you that there's another thing right there? And I think Austin Ward asked Jim Knowles about something that you and I had discussed, I think, on our last show, which was in the Rushman package, when you bring in Caden Curry and you bring in Kenyatta Jackson, you're sticking them in the middle, keeping Jack and JT on the outside. Why not flip that around? And Jim Knowles' answer was, and to his credit, he did cite an example, and I remember the play when I can't recall who it was against. It was early on when Caden Curry absolutely smoked the guard, which was like, okay, yeah, that's cool. But his answer was, we experiment and try things, but you don't. That's just the thing, Jim. You don't. It's been that way all year. You haven't flipped that around. You haven't experimented with that. You haven't experimented with what Chad just said. And I would think that if you're trying all these ways to get pressure with just 4 men without having to bring somebody else, that these are the types of things you would be messing around with.
Agreed. And I brought up on my show with Dan a few weeks ago, my disappointment in not seeing Mitchell Melton, because in the off season and in the summer, all I heard from Simmons and Frye was that Melton is the hardest of the defensive ends to block. Why are we not why are we not seeing that? I don't understand. We've been hearing about Mitchell Melton since Jim Knowles came to be the jack and all these, and then he got hurt and all these things. Why are we not seeing that? It's beyond baffling to me.
Yeah.
And I'm not at practice. I don't know, but weird. Just weird.
It is. That was definitely a guy that we were talking about all off season. And what we've seen of him so far, when he's in the game, it looks exactly like what they were talking about. Like, I don't know about you, but he looks great out there when I see him.
Oh, he does.
There. Yeah. They're so addicted to the Jack and JT thing, man. It's like they just want him on the field at all times. And they're really, really good football players. But,
I want to know what promises were made.
Wouldn't that be nice to know?
Or what videotapes they have. Something just doesn't feel right in that. And I'm not dissing Jack and JT. They've been Buckeyes. They are Buckeyes. Jack's from Ohio. Like, they do a good job with the pressures. I think it's okay to let other people play too. So weird. All right, man. So
I said the other day, the whole conversation about these two guys over the years that we've had, what a disservice they were done by being rated as 2 of the top 5 prospects in the country. It was really unfortunate for them, because if those guys came in as mid-range 4 stars, which we would be very happy about, good recruits, blue chippers, they would not get this same kind of vitriol. So that is kind of the thing that sucks for them. We wouldn't have had that expectation when they came in, that these guys had a ceiling of, not chase, but something to that effect. So real dominant guys. And neither of them have been dominant guys, except for a flash in the pan here or there. Luckily for us, JT's got Penn State. So time to eat.
It's there was a movie where the bad guy comes to life once every 7 years. That's JT when he plays Penn State. He comes to life once every Penn State. But sorry, I couldn't help myself. The other thing I would say, and I remember this to this day, I was watching, and I'm usually pretty good about weeding through the BS, but I remember watching Bucknuts, and when Jack Sawyer committed to Ohio State, they said this is the 3rd Bosa brother, and that's the kind of disservice that's been done, because honestly, Nick was better than Joey. but Nick didn't stay healthy. And then we rolled right into Chase Young, and all those guys are one of one, you know.
Yeah.
And to put that pressure on those guys or that expectation, it's really tough. And then I hear the same thing now about Edric Houston, and I got news for you guys. He's going to slide inside. He's not going to be an edge. So you might as well just like put that to bed. So
Chad,
he's going to end up on the inside.
When I was down at the Woody, and it was the first time I had seen a lot of those young guys, I shook Edric Houston's hand. I want to tell you that this guy is the most physically developed freshman I've ever seen in college. And from his back to his chest, he looked like an NFL player, but he was
even more so than Jeremiah Smith.
Well, different body styles.
Okay, all right.
He was so. I'm talking for the lineman. Like he was bigger than JT. He was bigger than Jack. Just like more physically imposing than any of them. By the way, Caden McDonald, that dude is not 6'3". He's not 6'2". He's quite a bit shorter than he's listed, which is even more amazing that he's able to be so dynamic. But Edric Houston was so physically impressive, and that was my first thought. Like, there is no way this guy's going to stay outside. Like, he looks like this is a freshman. Also, an incredibly cool kid and really, really nice. I'm really rooting for him. Ryan Day brought him up the other day. I'm hoping. It seems like a pipe dream, but he did say we want to see more snaps of him. I think we saw him 5 snaps against Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see more of that kid, man. I really do.
Yeah, he's not. So I did a breakdown of him with Dan one time, and I like recruiting a lot, and I wish I had more time to get it, like to do more of it for our show, because that's the number one request I get from people is to talk more about recruiting. But he does not have the bend on the edge that you could see from Chase Young or even really JT Tuimoloau, because JT Tuimoloau doesn't have great bend. But the great pass rushers, their ability to get around the tackle and have that bend and get home and not lose their balance or get their legs taken out from them under them, that's what makes them great. That's how they're elite. Edric was a bull rusher. He was bigger than everybody. He had the ability to set the edge. But he will be a 3 technique in the Larry Johnson defensive line room if he's not already. He's going to be too big. He's not going to be able to. It's just maybe you could put him out there occasionally, but he's going to end up sliding inside. Sorry, guys. I hate to burst all of your little bubbles.
Well, what you said is the reason that I was not like, so that cycle as it went on, like I was disappointed, and I wasn't extremely high on Edric Houston. I was definitely not as high as everybody else because of what you're talking about. It just didn't pop to me like that. Like some of the other edge rushers in that class, even some of the ones in 2025 that you look at, like a guy like Damian Shanklin, who was nowhere near as rated as high, but just that's the kind of body style I want out there. And I wasn't super stoked about Edric. What a pleasant surprise, man. I think he's just an unbelievable football player, and wherever they end up putting him, he's going to be a difference maker for sure.
Absolutely. If you wanted me to like describe the perfect mold for what I would want out there, it's Kenyatta Jackson.
That's the body, right?
Yeah, that's the body type. So that's the Damian Shanklin. That's the kid that went to South Carolina. That the guy we lost out on to Miami. I kind of put those guys out of my head because it just makes me mad. But those are the body types. That's the bend. That's the ability to push and take the corner, and they're elite physically, but they are very gifted with their balance. And not to say Edric isn't. He's too broad. He's too big of a kid. There was another comparison I wanted to make about trying to keep their weight. Oh, Sonny Styles trying to keep his weight down to play safety. It's essentially the same concept. Like he's a linebacker. He's probably going to be an edge / hybrid in the NFL. Asking that kid to keep his weight under 230, like his body's just not meant to do that. That's not his frame. That's not his build. It's not the way he's, it is. So same with Edric Houston. Sorry, went on a tangent there.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I never liked that concept of trying to keep a 19 or 20-year-old's weight down. If it's not, we're not talking about fat. We're talking about naturally they want to get bigger. When you look at And that's one of the things when you look at JJ, like when you look at the amount of muscle mass he's put on in the last year and a half, we're not talking like he's training in a way to maximize muscle mass. That's not how he's training.
Mm-hmm.
He's just naturally going to pack on more and more muscle mass, which is like, man, I'm not going to doubt this kid that he's going to be able to move as good with another 15 or 20 pounds of muscle in the pros, but that's just going to be that's a lot of extra weight. And I
That's
don't
DK
feel like,
Metcalf, man.
yeah, I don't feel like he's going to need to try to not keep it on. He's just a genetic freak like that, where
Mm-hmm.
it just piles on as you get through your early 20s.
Yeah.
There's going to be a month. I mean, he already is a monster, but to think of him in 5 years, it's so cool. Did you
Yeah.
see that picture this morning that the founder of South Florida Express put out
Yeah.
with young Garrett Wilson and young JJ? How cool
Yes.
was that?
Yeah. It took me a minute too to like look at
Me
it, and then I
too. I
was
was
like,
like, what am I
oh
looking
yeah.
at here?
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Well, that brings up a really good topic. Transition right to wide receivers. So we always talk about developed here. So yeah, Garrett Wilson. You've had Jeremiah Smith. I wrote down a whole bunch of them. And Chris Olave obviously came in as a 3-star, but Jackson Smith and Jigba. So you go like boom, boom, boom with these elite 5 stars. Would it have mattered where they went? Would it have mattered where Garrett Wilson went? Like that kid came in NFL ready. He just did. And would Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't play much as a freshman, by the way, but like those guys, the genetics, their ability, could they have went to Indiana and been, top 30 picks in the NFL draft? Would it have mattered? Or is this, and this is what I like put my little hat on, is that Brian Hartline played the position in Ohio State. He played the position in the NFL, and he knows how to coach these guys to get ready for the route trees, how to run it, how to preserve your body, how to maintain your body, how to be ready for the NFL, what to expect in the NFL. So would it have mattered?
Interesting topic. So my brother sent me yesterday, after those two amazing Garrett Wilson catches, the production top, I don't know, 35 wide receivers in the NFL. And we had 5 Buckeyes in that list. And, we were both excited about it, talking about it. And I said to him, I don't know how the hell Brian Hartline ever misses on a wide receiver with this kind of production coming out of Ohio State. It's just amazing. It's incredible. But to your point, would it have mattered between Ohio State and a couple of other super high-end professional style schools that really put out
Georgia,
other good wide
Alabama?
receivers? Probably not, right?
No,
Probably
much.
not. Those guys all just really gifted dudes. When we drop down to maybe that second tier, at that point, I think it matters. I do think that there are a lot of other schools that put out some really high quality coached wide receivers that are ready to roll in the NFL. And that's why Hartline focuses so much on recruiting, because that's how he gets the edge. He goes out and gets the best dudes to start with, and then he can make them even better. But I do think that there are several other schools, that's not a ton, but you could probably pick a dozen other schools that have a high end wide receiver coach that could probably make them just about as good when they are a finished college project. And that's why it's just so important to go out and get that better block of clay to start with. And that's why he's such a dogged recruiter, which, you want everybody to have that attitude. They don't all have it.
Yep. It just was one of those things. I with the Garrett Wilson catch, it kind of popped in my mind. I'm like, like that's that athletic ability, the ability to go make those catches, the body control. Those guys were going to be good no matter what. I think Brian Hartline just makes them elite. And so that's for me, there's kind of 3 categories. There's good, there's great, and there's elite. And I think Brian Hartline takes the good / great high school players, makes them NFL ready and elite. So when they get in the league, they're ready to go. And that's the difference between Ohio State and Brian Hartline and everybody else, personally, in my
they're
opinion.
definitely ready to go faster than 95% of the schools. There are a couple who can also measure up in that department. LSU is certainly one of them. Alabama certainly has been one of them, but not many. And he is certainly awesome. So happy that we've been able to have him for so long. And we don't often talk about it, but it ain't going to last forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about recruiting with you, Juck, because I know that you and I know you have an interest in recruiting, and I know you have a pipeline and a line into the recruiting. And so what I did is I just looked at 2026 Ohio State football offers. And the thing that everybody continues to point to, at least for me when I talk to people, is they're like, well, what about the quarterback in 2026? We've got, obviously, you have Julian Sand, Aaron Nolan, Tavian St. Clair coming in 2025. 2026 is such an odd year, because really, let's say, you redshirt Tavian. So pick your poison between Aaron and Julian. They play for 2 years, they're gone. Tavian plays for 2 years, he's gone. So this 2026 is kind of a limbo for me. And so I was just looking, and I know they had interest in like all of these are offers, that they've put out. And so, most of these guys have already made a commitment, but then you have this interesting situation with Brady Palmer. He's not as highly rated as some of the others, but he's still, um, probably top 20, I would say. In that, what is he positionally 43? Excuse me. And then, eh, so where do you land on this? What do you think? Is 2026 really that odd of a year for Ohio State in the quarterback realm?
You had a really unique situation where I think there was several of these kids that wanted to come to Ohio State, but the situation in the quarterback room scared them off, and I don't blame them.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at Ohio State's position and where they're at with that quarterback room, I'm not particularly concerned about 2026. When we talk about Brady Palmer, definitely not the direction I would go. What I would do in this particular situation is you've got an opportunity to now go out and get a guy who you're probably thinking isn't ever going to start for you. Let's take a shot on a guy with one really unique skill and see if we can't make the things that aren't quite there a little bit better. So, whether that be an incredibly dynamic athlete or someone with a cannon arm who lacks in another area, but someone with one really great trait. And Brady Palmer is about as mid as it gets, a really heady kid,
Yeah.
but he's really efficient. Like, I think he'd be a great quarterback at like a West Virginia, you know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing dynamic about him. He's got a bit of a noodle arm, and it's just not exciting to me whatsoever. You could
He's
do
JJ
that.
McCarthy.
Not quite the athlete, but yeah, similar in a couple ways. But
Well, you said mid all the way around, so I just came
yeah,
out with it.
I think that that's the direction that I would want them to go. Someone with one great skill. But at any rate, I'm not concerned about it in the least. We know
No.
what we're doing with Brady Edmonds in 2027, and that one is so far down. Like, I feel
Yeah.
very, very confident in that one. And I've talked to Brady, and I feel so good about that. That
Right.
26 is just like, let's get somebody in here who could be exciting, maybe has the potential to start. If you want to go the other direction and get the guy that, okay, maybe this can actually be a quality backup at some point who will stick around. I just don't think that you can really bank on that anymore. If you're a quality backup and you think you can start at a West Virginia or something, you're going to leave.
Yeah. I think the concern that I hear most is Devin Brown won't be here next year. He's got a lot of interest from around the, different programs. I would have to believe. I can't say with any certainty, sort of. And Lincoln Keenholz, same. So you're going into next year. Will Howard obviously will be gone. So you'll have, Julian Sayin, Aaron Noland, and your 2025, which is Tavian St. Clair being an early enrollee. It wouldn't shock me if Ohio State went out and got the Chris Chugunov of the world out of the portal just to, settle the room. It's a really young room. And I'm making an assumption about Lincoln Keenholz, that he would leave. But I do, you have to believe that he wants to play football. So, I don't think this is as Dan would put it, a happy to be here just to be an Ohio State guy, in the Jaden Ballard realm of things. That's Dan's example of somebody's just happy to play for Ohio State. So I guess that's why I think there's some interest in that 26 quarterback, recruiting. Because if you look at that, you kind of think, okay, well, you're potentially an injury away from a true freshman being your backup or a transfer. Let's say Eric gets sick of it and he's gone. I'm not putting that out there in the ether. Like, I'm just, hypothetically. So you have Julian saying Taven St. Clair and potentially a transfer journeyman quarterback.
Yeah, well, I mean, 26 is going to be behind Tavian. I just don't see how that makes much of a difference to me, to be honest. But
It
I do
doesn't.
also,
It doesn't.
like you, I think that in this mix, we're probably going to start seeing from here on much more of the Chugunov situation, where we do filter in a guy like that, just to have on the roster and keep in that room and keep the numbers up. And we're going to see a whole lot more fluidity in, especially in these quarterback rooms moving forward. When you talk about potentially, and I hate to say this because, last year it certainly looked like you never would have had all these 5 guys remain. Certainly looked like we'd lose a couple of them, and we
Right.
didn't. And then you go in, and now we're saying next year you're probably going to lose Devin Brown and maybe Lincoln. And who knows? I hate to even put it on them, but I'm with you. Like, these guys both want to play football, and
Yeah.
the writing seems to be kind of on the wall with what Ryan Day wants to do, and that seems to be Julian saying. I don't know that pushes Air out of the way. Air's still pretty damn young, where at least another year in the program trying to get those reps and being just a snap away sounds like something that he would be interested in. And having talked to his dad, and the attitude that they have about Ohio State is they're staying, they love it, they're staying and fighting, which is the same attitude DB has had. And when you get to a certain point, you're just running out of time. You got to go
Yeah.
play. So I
Well,
don't fault
that
DB
was
at
my
all.
point about Devin Brown. I think he's just
Yeah.
out of time.
Yeah.
And if Dave really has appointed Julian Sane as the, heir apparent, I'll say it that way. You gotta make a move in your own best interest, So
Yeah, for sure.
one of the things that so you guys are probably wondering why I'm not talking much about 2025. I've kind of moved on from 2025. Most of that hay is in the barn. We're a month and 6 days away from early National Signing Day, unless Ohio State makes a big push for a flip on an offensive line target or something. I think we are where we are. So I've kind of made that switch over. And so I was looking at running backs just because I started to think, it's going to be, I like Isaiah West a lot coming in this year. He's kind of like that guy that I think could be the guy behind James Peoples. I think you're an Isaiah West guy, right?
I'm the Isaiah West OG. Yes.
Okay. And so I like him coming in a lot. I like Bo Jackson coming in a lot. I think that those three, I'm never afraid really to start a true freshman running back or play a true freshman running back. Going all the way back to J.K. Dobbins as a true freshman, starting against Indiana in the weirdest opener ever, starting against a Big Ten opponent for a season. Your starter goes down and J.K. Dobbins is a starter and he played well. So I'm really going back into memory banks there. I was trying to, it was Mike, gosh, we're 25 and racking my brain. It was going to be a starter that year and he split reps with J.K. Dobbins. Anyways, so looking at 2026, man, what do you think of Savion here? I watched some of his film. A lot of it's his sophomore film. Have you looked at him? Have you read about him? He reminds me of J.K. Dobbins. He's shorter, compact, powerful, has a good burst, runs track.
Stud. Don't like his attitude. Don't like the things I've seen him say. Really don't like his relationship with Tony Alford and the way that that all went down. This is a kid who was really in on Ohio State when Alford was in. And when Alford left, You know, I can't recall exactly what he said about it, but I
Mm-hmm.
remember it irritated me quite a bit. The ego seems really, really big. When
Right.
that list right there is a
Yeah.
kid on that list that I absolutely love, and that's Demarius Yates, who is committed to Mississippi State,
Mm-hmm.
who is high school teammates with Mario Nash, which is a 2025 lineman who we missed out on. But Locke absolutely loves Demarius Yates. This kid's film is some of the most exciting you're going to see in that entire class. If anybody hasn't checked it out and you like running back film, check out Demarius Yates. This is the kind of guy that I really want. We're talking about Turbo Rogers in this class of 2025
Yep.
cycle. This kid is as dynamic and as fast as Turbo. I want one of those styles in this class, man. I
Yep.
really do. I think that that is an element that we've been missing for quite a while,
Yep.
and it's not going to happen with Turbo.
Yeah.
Demarius Yates would be a guy really high on my list there. A lot of people are talking about Sean Alston out of Paynesville, a really highly rated back out of Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
and they have not offered him. I
Not
don't
yet.
really see it coming. I'm not
I don't
impressed
either.
with
He's
his
going to
film
have
at
to
all.
camp.
I don't think he's an Ohio State back from what I could see on his film. We'll see what he does at camp, but and I'm not even talking about the level of competition. I just don't see it in him. Um, I'm not someone who looks at someone at lower competition and says, "Yeah, well," and just writes them off. I know a lot of people have that attitude, and you look at a guy like Brody Lennon. That kid's awesome. If you can't see that kid's awesome against that lower competition, I don't know what to tell you, man. But you know,
I'm with
running
you.
backs
I get that question a lot. I got it a lot
about
about
Sean
Sam Williams
Alston.
Dixon. Yeah.
Oh, the
No, just about
competition.
level of competition. Sam Williams Dixon. So West Holmes High School, I can almost hit with a rock from my house. Not literally, but it's within, 20 minutes. So he played here, up in this area, and then obviously went down to Columbus. Level of competition was always a concern. And then you talk about Bachman Miller again, 30 minutes from my house. Tavian St. Clair, about an hour drive from my house. And so like everybody brings up level of competition, but so I always go back to, do they dominate the way they should against lower level competition? And if the answer is yes, then they can play up. And so hopefully that helps people, Jack. That's how, because I watched Sam Williams Dixon up here, and the guy, like, he'd have three great guys draped on him, in his Division 7, where he was playing, and he'd break it, and he'd average 500 yards a game, and, return kicks and play defense, and he did it all. And so, kind of how I felt about it. I don't know about you.
I really, yeah, it's just something that always bothers me. And
Mm,
we'll look at the level he's playing against, or if someone's from a state where they don't play great competition, like Nate Roberts. I guess I'm just on tight end talk today. Nate Roberts is playing in Oklahoma, and I've seen people downplay him. He must, he's slow. Look at him on the film against kids from Oklahoma. That kid looks like 2 years in college he could be NFL ready to me. I mean, I think
yeah.
he's going to be excellent. But yeah, dude, the competition thing, as long as you know what you're looking at going into it on the film, okay, we're looking at lower competition, so we change our adjustment. I think a lot of people don't look at the competition when we look at linemen. Look at the guy across from him, check him out for a couple of plays. You can kind of get a better gauge that way as well. You look at a guy like Adam Guthrie, who's playing in Ohio Division III, and a lot of people knock the competition he's playing because he's so much bigger than the guys across from him. He's 6'7", 295. They're not. When you look at a lineman, look at how his feet move. Look at his aggressiveness. Is he a big guy that got pushed into football because he's big and people thought he's got a future here and he starts to think maybe he does? Or is he a guy who really gets in there and loves to play football? You look at a guy like Guthrie, man, it shines through. Loves to play football, loves to get in the mix, full of fire, full of piss and vinegar. That's what I love about watching lineman tape, man. You can
Yeah.
decipher a whole lot from that. Good guy like JB Shabazz, another kid in the class of 26 they recently offered. Doesn't. Looks like a kid who just got pushed into football because he's big and they said you got a future here. Those are the guys I don't like.
Well, so that you and I did a show a week and a half ago, where I talked about the Andrew Babaloa that went to Michigan out of Kansas, the hotbed of college football, and much I felt much the same way about him. Like, he's got the intangibles and the measurables, which is why he has a 5th star, but you're not going to see him for 3 years. It's just the way it is. So I don't put much of stock in ESPN, but I like this grid because I'm an Excel guy. And so this is just Ohio 2026 top recruits. And
I cannot believe they've got Sean Alston over
look at
those
this.
linemen. That's crazy.
Yeah. So Rock Hill and Victor Singleton, 1A, 1B for me. Like you can, whatever. I don't care which one you pick. If I had a lean, I would lean Singleton because I think he's going to end up probably being 6'1", 6'2" by the time he's done growing. Rock Hill's a little bit smaller, but he's very lean, like 165. Now this is probably old too because I feel like I saw he was at like 170 something. And then your guy Sean Alston, you mentioned. I've watched his film. Not sure. Jury's out on that for me. But then what I wanted to bring up was, you have, we talked about the O linemen. So you have Maxwell Riley, Adam Guthrie, Sam Greer, and Will Conroy in the top 12. And then somebody I really, 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 really love is Storm Miller. And I hope he gets a chance to play camp and play for Ohio State. But I love that kid's attitude. So if you were going to rank these guys as like, we need to get 75% of these. So we have to get 3 of the 4. We absolutely have to. We cannot miss. It's got to happen. Where would you put them in order, taking away your personal relationship with them? And I know you talked to some of them, but just skill alone, these guys will play for Ohio State. They will be day 1 or 2 to NFL draft picks. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then who do you have to have of those 4? We want all 4. Let's just say it like that. But if you could only get 3, who's your 3?
I think for me, this comes back to an entire philosophy, and it's a philosophy that is the identity of Ohio State football that Ohio State has gotten away from under Ryan Day. And it starts up front, man. It starts up front. Yeah. I'm so sick of not being able to be proud of a football team that will go out and maul you up front, and watching our rivals be the team that everybody in the country talks about over the last 3 years is the team that is tough up front and physical up front. And watching our team go into that Oregon game, in a game that I thought they were 100% going to dominate up front. Finally, a Ryan Day team doing that, and they didn't. I just feel like I would sacrifice almost every big-time position player to be able to land an excellent offensive line class. Guthrie, Riley, Greer, Emmanuel Ahianacho, Darren Parks, Duron Parks, who was down in West Virginia but transferred down to Florida, Darius Gray from Maryland, kid that was up camping that got an offer that was beating Jakeem Stewart, Grant Wise from Florida. There's a plethora of guys that we have relationships with now on the offensive line. And that is 100% all hands on deck. They have got to restock this pipeline with quality offensive linemen, or we're going to be looking at another 4 or 5 years of this lackluster offensive line play where we're talking about bringing in guys from the portal. If we're talking about these kids, man, it's Greer, it's Guthrie, because we need the tackle bodies for me. It's Max Riley, who looking like an interior guy right now, but
agreed.
His dad's 6'8". He's already 6'5". Okay. Very good chance that he could end up being a true tackle body as well. As far as offensive lineman skill, he's probably the most skilled, but we need those tackle bodies. We need Greer. We need Guthrie. Will Conroy, not just a great center, but maybe one of the smartest kids out there. What he said to me about LeCharles Bentley, when I asked him, what do you feel about LeCharles Bentley as a coach? You expect a 17-year-old to say, I don't know, a sentence or two. The kid wrote a paragraph back to me that I'll share sometime on the timeline. And it was like, wow, like this is just a really smart kid. We look at Seth McLaughlin right now. Give me another really smart center who likes to maul, and that is absolutely who he is. Yeah. You got to pull it up here. Emmanuel Ahianachu, we got a really good relationship with him. That's your big swing, right? Take your big swing and then lock up the dudes that you feel you should get, and be dogged recruiters with them. You've got to get it done. Whether that's Frye, whether that's somebody else, this all comes down to this for me. This is starting to feel like make or break with the way the current transfer portal is laid out. They have got to get 5 or 6 quality offensive linemen in this class. It's got to happen.
I would take 8 if I could.
Bro, I'm with you. They need these guys in the program, and whether they leave or not, or they don't pan out. What's your hit rate on offensive linemen? It's not very high.
No,
so
that's the point.
You've got to keep bringing these bodies in.
Yeah, here's where I'm at with this is that I talked so much about Michigan and a Joe Moore Award and winning and mauling people. The difference between Ryan Day, Urban Meyer, and Jim Harbaugh is that Ryan Day, he's a little more finesse. He's a little more NFL, and Urban Meyer was probably the most dogged closer for recruits I've ever seen in college football. Like if that guy wanted you, he was going to get you. And he did that with the linemen, both sides of the line. And where you see the changes after 2019, you get into 2020, that Alabama team was a juggernaut. We weren't going to beat them, even if Tommy Togiai was on the bus, and we didn't have linebackers guarding Devontae Smith on post routes, but they weren't going to win that championship. But then you start to see that descent in 2021. We go up to Michigan and in the snow, and just our offensive line just got beat. And that's been the MO. And so you're right. The Emmanuel Okachino, he's the David Sanders of that group. I think he's probably the one that you could say, okay, I think I could bring him in and he could start day one as a true freshman. I've watched a lot of Jackson Cantwell, a lot, and I'm not in on him.
No, I don't know how in the hell they could have him above Iheanacho. It's not even close for me.
So I nice kid. And that might be the problem.
Like I said, you know how I like my offensive linemen.
Yeah, so I'm with you. You got to have the Maxwell Rileys. We've got to have the Adam Guthries. We've got to have that group. But if you could get 6, 7 offensive linemen and make get the 4 in Ohio, you're bringing in Carter Lowe, and who somebody I really really like a lot is Carter Lowe. But he's another one that he's probably 2 years away. He's going to need a freshman and probably a redshirt freshman year to be ready. Just his body to hold up in Big Ten football, just the way that it is. But yeah, I'm with you, man. Like, gosh, this is it. This is the year. You've got 4 what I would consider top 100 linemen in Ohio. Got to get it. Got to make it happen. So,
and you look at that board and you look at those guys and you say, okay, well, I mean, looks like you got relationship. I mean, and they do. All those guys I said, like the good relationships going with those guys, but starting to peter out with a couple of them, including one of those Ohio 4 who is seriously doubting. There's another one of them who was really, really irritated for quite a while. The relationship is somewhat getting repaired. Remember, guys, at this time last year, you had a similar looking board, just without the Ohio guys, but a pile of guys like that you had relationships with. And the only one out of that initial crop of offers that you had relationships with that they were able to land was Carter Lowe. Great, but an in-state kid. You had the advantage. It was a tough one, tough recruit with against Michigan for a kid in Toledo. So it was a win. You get credit for the win. But that was the only one out of that initial crop. Then you get Jake Cook in the class, who you didn't really want or didn't really have on your board. He won that offer. That wasn't someone you were after. And then in your second round,
okay, lose your mic.
In your second round of offers, you land Javon McFadden. So as for that first round we're looking at, that's the first round. And we got 1 out of the first round last year.
Yeah.
I like
Javon McFadden.
I think he's great. I do. Yep. I love it. But I'm just talking about, this looks really promising at the moment. How good can we really feel about it getting done? I don't know. I don't know if you can tell me that you feel better about it with Justin Frye or someone new, because let's keep in mind when we're talking about Ohio kids who are the priority here, they may feel just fine with a guy coming in that has a great reputation already, coming in brand new under the same regime. They may feel better about it than
Do
Justin
you have
Frye.
someone
You know what
in
I mean? Like,
mind?
it's less of a gamble when we're talking about the Ohio kids when you're making a coaching change than it is with the out-of-state kids who just have the relationship with Justin Frye. The Ohio kids have the relationship with Ohio State.
Right. So this is going to be, we'll wrap it up here, man, but appreciate you coming on and helping me out. If tomorrow, let me just like Justin Frye says, I'm done. I'm out. I can't do it. It's Ohio State. There's too much pressure. I suck at life, whatever. I'm just kidding about that part. But, and LeCharles Bentley calls Ryan Day and says, I'll come fill in. You don't even have to pay me. Is he your guy? Like, is he the guy? Like, Ohio State guy, played in the NFL, has great relationships with these kids, coaches hard. He's a dog. Or do you go into the off season and do a nationwide search? Do you have a big board of 4 coaches that you would be looking at?
If Ryan Day is the head coach in this hypothetical scenario,
He is.
Okay. Ryan Day is the head coach in this hypothetical scenario. I don't think there's any way LeCharles Bentley gets this job.
Okay.
LeCharles Bentley, if Urban Meyer was the head coach, I think it would work.
Yeah.
I think that LeCharles Bentley is brilliant, hardworking, incredible. Every one of them respects him. All the recruits, all the linemen. He's done it at the highest level. But LeCharles Bentley is a boss. He is not an employee. And I don't feel like Ryan Day would be able to just totally give away everything about the offensive line to LeCharles Bentley. And that's what he'd have to do, because there's no chance. There are just relationships in a workplace, and you understand them, that just don't work, man. And a guy like Ryan Day, I just don't see it working with a dude that is such an alpha, and he's going to do, not afraid of confrontation, does a lot. I mean, he is somewhat confrontational. You've seen it a lot. You and I live not too far. I'm from the Catholic school football circuit in Northeast Ohio. LeCharles has had a reputation for a long time. Like, LeCharles is a dude that will mix it up quick trigger. I don't know how that works in a coaching room at a major college football program, but I do know that it takes a strong leader if you're going to bring that in. I don't know if I would feel even comfortable with Ryan Day being the head coach in that scenario, though I do. There's nothing about LeCharles Bentley. I have 100% confidence that he would be great. I just don't know if it would work with that particular head coach personality, because there are certain dynamics that you just can't get over in a workplace. And we often forget that those things really, really matter. Big time, right? Like, those things are huge. We just look at it as, this guy's excellent at that, let's plug him in there. There's a lot that goes into it, and you got to fit personality wise. There's got to be harmony somewhat, like it's just one of those things that every time I hear LeCharles talk, I come away saying, that is a boss, not an employee. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Oh yeah. 100%. Yep. I mean, I lived in Akron for 15 years, and I'm no stranger to Archbishop Popin and St. V's and all the different football games. And, it's just the way that it was and still is with football up there in that neck of the woods. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that would be really tough, but I also flip it on its head and say, well, Ryan Day said Jim Knowles is the head coach of the defense. And so Jim Knowles can do what Jim Knowles does. Now, whether or not that's hyperbole and he's just saying that, and he's, because he did say in the bye week he spent time with the defense. So, I don't know. I'm just, it's all hyperbolic at this point, but he's somebody I point to because I feel like he's in Ohio. He understands Ohio. He understands Ohio State. And he has that mentality that I think we're lacking. And I think that's why there's that appeal for me, maybe.
Hell yeah.
And it's a little bit of that Urban Meyer-ness, I think. And I know listen, I don't romanticize the Urban Meyer era. I'm thankful we won a natty, but we lost to an unranked Virginia Tech that year. We lost games that we never should have lost because, he was really good at getting the guys up for the big games. He was 7-0 against Michigan. I appreciate all of that. But there's a reason he's not coaching in college anymore, is that style, it doesn't work anymore. And there was never anything more apparent to me, and I'm going to get it for this, than when he said they need to run Will Howard 15 or 20 times this weekend. That told me that the game is starting to pass Urban Meyer by. And so thank you, Urban, for the national championship. I really enjoy your restaurant when I'm in Columbus. But, at this point, I don't align myself with the fact that we should run Will Howard 20 times in a football game when you have Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson.
Chad, I don't think starting, man. When he said that, it was like, and I'm an advocate for running Will more.
Mm-hmm.
Can't stand what we heard Chip say over the week this week on Tuesday.
Sure. That was terrible.
Which is a total 180 from what he was saying all off season.
Yeah,
that was 100% a very telling line to me. Those were Ryan Day's words coming out of Chip's mouth. That's 100% what that was. But to say he's going to run, what Ohio State should do is run quarterback power 15 to 20 times a game, just absurd, absolutely absurd. And the game's definitely passed him by. I also don't romanticize the Urban era, but important to note, as a lot of people who are Ryan Day defenders, and I don't fall into either camp on Ryan Day at this point, a lot of people point out Ryan Day doesn't lose those one-off embarrassing games. In this current system, those games don't matter. All those teams, the Purdue team that lost, the Iowa team, like those no longer matter. So if we're talking about moving forward, we want the coach that wins the big games and don't care so much about those little slips here and there. Of course, they were hugely consequential then. But if we're talking about a coach now, just winning the games you're supposed to win isn't good enough. You got to win the big games.
It's the same thing I get frustrated with when people try to compare Archie Griffin and Ezekiel Elliott. It's completely different era and style of football. You're never going to, it's just, it's the old, no one's ever going to break Cal Ripken's Ironman record. So in today's game, if Urban had lost that Iowa game like he did, oh, well, whoopity-doo. We lost a game. No big deal. Not a problem. Then the expectation of perfection and the need for it was critical. So, you can't compare the two now, unfortunately.
Chad, I listened to an argument yesterday. Does a 10-2 Alabama get in the playoff over an 11-1 Indiana? And again, an Alabama team that lost to Vanderbilt, right? So like that's how inconsequential those kind of losses are now. And I've had to rewire my brain because for all of our lives as college football fans, I would sit as we went into a season, and when those losses would come, man, boom, they're off the list. We don't have to worry about them. Boom, Oklahoma lost, they're off the list. We don't got to worry about them. And that's how I watched it. And that's how I loved it. And it's totally different now. So
it is.
It's not about
it's
the
a little
loss.
more. Yeah, it's been hard. It's been a hard adjustment, I think, for all of us, that have been really, really into college football the last 20, 25 years and in our age group, what we're used to going from the BCS era into the playoff era. And, like that, I always said the expectation of perfection, like that's what it is. Like it had to be. And, it's very, very different. And, even Notre Dame, Notre Dame had a terrible loss to an FBS school, and they're still in the top 15, I think now. The AP
they
poll,
get in if they win out for sure.
Yeah. Cause they're Notre Dame, so, just on brand alone. Yeah. All right, man. Well, A, thank you again for filling in for Dan while he's out there ruling the world. B, if you want, if people don't know where to find you by now, I don't know how to help them after your third time on the show, but if you want to tell them where to find you, have at it.
Are we allowed to read Dan's text message that just came through? I don't know.
You can read it if you want.
So a text message just came through on the group text with Chad, Dan, and myself. Dan does not feel good going into the game. I mean, it's Penn State. We own them.
Yeah.
Damn you, Ryan. That's a message from Dan, everybody.
Yeah.
You can find me at Juck on Bucks every morning at 9:30 on the Juck on Bucks YouTube channel, on any podcast you might have, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anything like that. I'm there with you every morning at 9:30. You can also find me on the Menace to Sports channel on YouTube at 9:30 a.m. And we go live. I'd appreciate it if you'd come join me. Pop in the comments if you do. Say hello. At the end of every show, I bring that up and let the chat kind of run the show wherever we go. Always have a good time with that every day. And we also do the post-game show, which I'll be expecting many of you to come watch. That is after every Ohio State Buckeye game. I try to say immediately after the game, but sometimes I need about 10, 15 minutes to gather my thoughts. So check me out there. Can't wait to see you guys there. Chad, thank you as always. Always love our conversations. Today, particularly fun for me. I don't know why. I just really like this one. We got into a lot of fun topics. Well, have a great weekend, brother.
Yeah, you too, man. I appreciate you. And yeah, I love, if I can, I jump on you and listen to the 9:30 live show, and then I'll drop in a couple comments in between meetings and stuff. I try really hard to always get in and give you the like and the thumbs up, and because you just do a great job. It's a lot of fun. So, and the post game is really cool too. It's always interesting to see the ongoing meltdown. So, but yeah, appreciate you, man. Thank you for filling in. And as always, it was a good show. We did a lot of different things today. We didn't just talk about Penn State. So, but you guys, again, if you're going to the game, have fun. If you're watching the game at home, have fun, but be safe, whatever you do. Have a good weekend. And it's a Juck Guy Friday.
One more thing, Chad?
Yeah, man.
Guys, if you're listening to this show and you are not subscribed, these guys need 500 subscribers, have been going at it, working their butts off. If you're not subscribed, what are you doing? Let's subscribe to the best damn pod in the land, please.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, we're trying. But yeah, you guys, thank you again. It's a Juck Eye Friday, not a Buckeye Friday, but stay safe. And as always, go Bucks.
Go Bucks.